without any further delay, coming to tonight's session on quantifying value, let me give you an introduction to our very distinguished and eminent speaker of tonight, Mr. Mark Stiving. Mr. Mark Stiving loves pricing. As a child, he often wondered why companies always use 99% endings, asking himself, do companies think we are stupid? He had a chance to study his question during his doctoral program at the University of California at Berkeley and hasn't looked back since. As a director of pricing for Maxim Integrated, a $2.5 billion semiconductor company, Stiving guided pricing strategies, successfully led massive change management efforts, and coached colleagues on an implementation of value-based pricing. His efforts generated well over $100 million in additional profit each year. In his free time, Stiving speaks, coaches, and writes about pricing. He shares his expertise in the highly readable book, Impact Pricing, Your Blueprint to Driving Profits, which averages 5 stars on Amazon. He also publishes a blog and a podcast of the same name, Impact Pricing. His most recent company, aptly called Impact Pricing, focuses on educating people and companies about value and pricing, with a special interest in subscription-based products. An award-winning speaker, he frequently delivers addresses at industry events and teaches 1- and 2-day pricing courses. As he says, my biggest thrill is watching people experience the aha moments. A very warm welcome to you, Mark. We are absolutely thrilled to have you here with us tonight. Handing the session over to you. Over to you, Mark.
Thank you, Kustaf. I'm going to wait till I see my face on the screen.
You can start sharing now.
Yeah, so I shouldn't have to share. There we go. That's exactly what I want. Go ahead and pin that. Can you pin my face, please?
Yes, you're on the screen.
Perfect. Thank you so much. All right, guys, let's talk about quantifying value. That's what we're going to talk about the entire day today. And we'll start out with this question that we are so often asked, and that is, how much should I charge? It feels like it should be a math problem because in the end, isn't price a number? Aren't we just trying to figure out what's the dollar value we're going to put on a product after we've built it? It turns out pricing is so much more than that. And it's so much more than just a series of calculations. Let's take a look at what we really mean when we say, what is pricing? Because it turns out that there are some really big problems that companies face. And I'm going to say they're all related to pricing. What are some of these problems? First off, we don't get paid enough relative to the value that we create. You know that the products that you are building have huge value to your customers, and yet when you think about how much they paid you for it, it doesn't feel like we got our fair share. How about we build products or features that people don't buy or use? I was an instructor for pragmatic marketing, and we did a survey there, and they found that 37% of companies confessed to having built a product or a feature that nobody uses. I presented that in a room once and someone stood up and said yes, and the other 63% are lying. How often do we build things that people don't use, and why is that? Turns out our marketing messages aren't resonating with our buyers. We build these beautiful web pages and we tell so much about what we do and what our products are, and they're just so impressive, and yet the buyers don't really get it. They don't get excited the way we get excited about our products. Why is that? How about this one? Salespeople discount too often. How often are your salespeople discounting your products? I'll bet it's a lot. I'll bet it's real often because most companies have that exact same issue. And then finally, we don't know how to price our own products. And this is that first question we started with. How do we price our products? Turns out we can take every single one of these and say it's the exact same problem. And that's this. We don't understand our own value. We don't know how much our buyers value our product. What's even worse is we don't know how our buyers think about the value of our product. If you think about how do we go put a price on something at the very end, it has everything to do with how do our buyers think about our products. And yet, once we understand how buyers are thinking about our products, shouldn't that help the way we talk to them in our marketing messages? Shouldn't that help the way we sell to them when we're selling? Shouldn't that help the way we build products or choose which features we're going to build? All because we understand how our buyers are perceiving value. That's what we're after today. How do our buyers perceive value? And I promise we're going to quantify it. So at the end, I'm going to give you a way to put a number on it and say, what is this? So we're going to use Mentimeter today. Hopefully you guys have tried this before. Open up any browser. It could be on your phone. It could be on a separate browser on the computer that you're on. Go to the website menti.com. And once you're on that website, you're going to enter the code 6328656. Once you enter that, it's going to ask you, who are you? Please enter your first name. And do me a favor and do exactly that. Enter your first name. And so, oh, Jennifer's already there. Look at that. All I'm doing with this slide is A, getting to know you a little bit, seeing that you know how to use Menti, and we're going to use Menti several more times as we go through the presentation. Excellent. We are making progress. Look at this. Beautiful. Beautiful. Okay, now what we're going to do is something slightly different. And instead of your first name, I'm going to ask you to enter the answer to this question, what is value? And so you now have a new slide in front of you. What is value? 1 to 3 words. Go ahead. Don't be shy. Nobody knows what you type, so you can't be wrong. I'm going to guess that was the name. What is value? There we go. Returns quantified. Doing a job. Nice. What the customer needs. Love that. Solving a problem. Excellent. Excellent. Importance. Removing a pain. Those are excellent. All of these are beautiful. Profits. Okay. If you see one that somebody else has already typed that you liked it, go ahead and type that one in again, because then it'll make it bigger. There we go. Somebody likes customer satisfaction, solving a problem. Beautiful. Beautiful. Customer willingness pay. Love that. Solving a problem. Okay, these are beautiful answers, guys. Love this. Now, here's what I'd like everybody to do is I would like everybody to enter the following 3 letters. WTP. WTP. Go ahead and enter those 3 letters for me. Awesome. And now that you guys are entering WTP, you're wondering, what the heck does that mean? And that's an acronym that I use constantly, which fits really well with whoever entered customer willingness pay. It's willingness to pay. I use that constantly. When I think about value, I think about how much is my buyer willing to pay. And truly, that's what value is in my mind as we think about it. Oop, let's not do that one yet. Let's go to here first. So when you think about your company, the single most profitable pricing decision that you can make is adopt this thing called value-based pricing. And when I think about what value-based pricing means, all it means is we're going to charge what a customer is willing to pay. It's not magical. It's not easy, by the way, but it's not magical. It's just charging what a customer is willing to pay. Now, let me try to convince you why this makes sense. Let's pretend for a moment that you're building a product. You've got costs to build a product of $20. There's a buyer there, And that buyer, you know, the buyer is willing to pay you $100. How much do you think you should charge to win that deal? I'm thinking $100 makes a lot of sense. If we charge 110, they're not going to buy. If we charge 90, we just left $10 on the table. I think $100 makes sense. What if it costs us $50 and that buyer is willing to pay $100? How about $100? Let's charge 100. What if it costs 75 and the buyer is willing to pay 100? We should still probably charge 100. Here's a tricky one. What if it costs us $150, but the buyer's only willing to pay 100? Now what do we do? I would recommend we get out of that business because we don't have buyers who are willing to pay us more than it costs us to make it. It makes no sense to be in that business. But the whole point of this slide is for you to realize the single most profitable pricing decision your company can make is adopt value-based pricing, which simply means charge what your customers are willing to pay. Can we figure that out? What is a customer willing to pay? And so now we're going to get down to this concept of value. What does value mean? And I got to say, value is a really tricky concept. I'm going to give you a concept of value that you've never heard before, probably, and will just enlighten the way you think about pricing and products. There are two really big types of value that we're going to focus on today. One is what we'll call value in use. Value is the inherent value we get out of having a product or using a product. For example, how much value do you get out of having air to breathe? I'm guessing it's someplace way up here, right? It's infinite how much value we get. Okay, then we have this thing called value in choice. Value in choice is how much do we value something relative to the alternatives? If you value air to breathe infinitely, then how much would you pay me for this jar of air? And I'm guessing the answer is really close to zero. The reason for that is because you have free air all around you. You don't need to buy my air. So the value in choice, value relative to the alternatives, is zero. This means air is either worth everything or it's worth nothing, depending on if we're looking at value in use or value in choice. I have to tell you, this is a really important concept because now we're putting ourselves in the minds of our buyers so that we can understand how it is that they're thinking about our products. And that's going to impact the way we market it, the way we price it, the types of things that we're going to do with our products. When we think about value, then, value means willingness to pay. And we're going to find that buyers who are only making a value in use type decision, they are willing to pay us more than buyers who are making that value in choice type decision. And so if we think about the buyer's journey, you guys have probably heard of a buyer's journey before. We're going to talk about something we'll call a buyer's value journey. In a buyer's value journey, typically a buyer starts out by saying, am I going to buy a product in this product category? And after they've said yes to that, then they say, okay, which one am I going to go buy? Then they make the decision on which one they're going to buy, and then they buy something. So when we have a buyer making the will I decision, they're using value in use. Is this thing, is solving this problem really important to me? Is the money that to solve this problem in the budget? Because I can choose not to solve the problem. I can live with the pain of having the problem. And then I said value in use is too low relative to how much it's going to cost me to go buy this. But now I've said yes. Let's pretend that I've said yes. I really want to go solve this problem. I want to learn to play the piano. And so I've said, yes, I need to go buy a piano. Now, which one am I going to go buy? Now I go out and I shop multiple different alternatives. What I'm looking for is the best bang for the buck. And it turns out that we become more price sensitive when we're making that which one decision. Then we go on to buy it. Most purchases go through both of these decisions. First, the people say, am I going to buy something in the product category? Then they go on and say, yes, I am, which one am I going to go buy? And then they buy something. This is them determining the value of our product. How do they think about our product? Let's talk about buying a car for a second. So when you're going to go buy, this gentleman here just bought a car, and think about yourself. Are you in the market to buy a new car right now? I'm guessing the answer is probably not. But let's say that you were going to buy a new car and you're shopping here at the Mercedes, the Lexus, the Porsche. Is that Mercedes or BMW? I think it's Mercedes. So you're shopping at the Mercedes, Lexus, and Porsche dealers because you make way too much money, of course. And as you're shopping you're thinking about buying a car, and the dealership, you kind of like the Lexus, but you haven't really committed to it. And the dealership sends you a coupon for 10% off the price of a Lexus. That sounds pretty interesting. That could motivate you to make the decision and say, I'm going to go buy the Lexus. But let's pretend for a moment that you're not in the market for a car. If you were, you might buy a Lexus. It's a pretty nice car, but you're thinking, yeah, I just don't need a car right now. And now you get the coupon from Lexus for 10% off a Lexus. Does that influence your decision? The odds are really good that it doesn't. When we're making a will I decision, price isn't driving that decision. But once we switch to a which one decision, price becomes so much more important to us. And this is a really, really important concept because sometimes buyers only make a will I decision. When they're making that will I decision, they're much, much less price sensitive. When they're making the which one decision, they're more price sensitive because now they're comparing different alternatives and which one should I buy and which one's more expensive and is it worth more as we buy it. The fascinating thing is buyers usually make both decisions, but not always. And this is really important for us to understand because sometimes buyers only make a will I decision. They didn't even think about a competitive alternative. Here's two examples that maybe you're familiar with. I'm not sure about everywhere in the world, but most places that I've taught, popcorn at the movie theater is expensive. And why is that? Because you walked into the movie theater, and once you get in the theater, you say to yourself, am I going to have popcorn today or not? It's a will I decision. It isn't, am I going to buy popcorn here or am I going to buy popcorn someplace else? It's, am I going to have popcorn or not? Or you've probably seen a sign if you've been driving in the middle of absolutely nowhere in the desert or there's nobody around, you see the sign that says last gas for 75 miles or kilometers or whatever the heck the distance is. And you look down, you've got an eighth of a tank of gas, you need to buy gas, you pull over. That gas station is probably 3 or 4 times more expensive than if you were buying it in the city. Why is that? Because there are no competitive alternatives. This is the one you're going to buy from. It's just a will I decision. When people are only making a will I decision, they're much, much less price sensitive. What we want to think about is sometimes we have products that just tend to be will I type products. Sometimes we can put our products into situations where they tend to be, people have to make will I decisions. For example, the last gas sign. In most cases, gasoline is a which one decision. People are going to decide which gas station do I go to, do I buy gas from? But when you're in the middle of nowhere and you're running out of gas, that became a will I decision. People became very less price sensitive because there were no competitive alternatives. Now, hopefully that makes a lot of sense to you guys, and we're going to make sure it makes sense because I have several examples that we're going to go through, and I'm going to let you guys test this. Now, as we go through, go to Menti again, whatever browser you had open, and what I want you to do is put yourself in the shoes of a product manager who has to set a price for the product. So if you are at McDonald's, you're the product manager at McDonald's, and you're in charge of pricing Coke. The question I'm going to ask you is, do most buyers make a will I decision or do most buyers make a which one decision? And the way you're going to think about that is, was a competitive alternative considered? So let's pop over to the Menti screen. Here we've got Coke at McDonald's. And let's see what kind of answers we're getting if we've gotten any yet. Go ahead and vote will I or which one. So we got which one. We got a few will I's now. More will I's coming in. You know, the great thing about Menti is it's totally anonymous and nobody knows if you got it wrong or right. Yeah, so more people on the will I side than the which one side at this point. I would agree with the will I people. And the reason I think it's a will I is because most people walk into McDonald's because they're going to buy a Big Mac, a quarter pounder, or a filet of fish, whatever it is they're going to go buy when they walk into McDonald's. And then they say, am I going to have a Coke today or not? What they're not saying is, I'm going to buy a Big Mac today, but I wonder if Coke is less expensive at the fast food place across the street. They're buying the Coke at McDonald's. So they're really making a will I decision. And if you think about the price of a soda at a fast food restaurant, it's expensive. It makes sense. If you're buying a soda at McDonald's in US dollars, it's $1.89. The cost to McDonald's for that is about 15 cents. Huge markup. But why do they get away with that? Because buyers are making a will I decision. Let's take a look at another one, the Apple Watch. Do you think the Apple Watch is a will I decision or a which one decision? Somebody who's going to buy an Apple Watch. And by the way, you're going to remember that you are the product manager. You're trying to price this product and you're looking at most of your buyers. Are they making a will I or a which one type decision here? Now we got more will I's coming in, a couple which ones. Yeah, almost evenly split on this one. Almost evenly split. Yeah, I tend to think this is more of a will I product, but I think it's less clear than the soda one. And the reason I think it's a will I product is most people who have an Apple iPhone are probably going to go buy, if they're going to buy a smartwatch, they're probably going to go buy an Apple Watch. They're probably not going to buy another version of the same watch, of a smartwatch. Now, on the other hand, what about a Garmin smartwatch? If you were going to vote for a Garmin smartwatch, do you think that's a will I or a which one? Yeah, this one's almost unanimous. We got a few people thinking it's will I. I would tend to agree with the which one folks on this one. And the reason for that is people who are going to go shop for Garmin might also shop for a Samsung smartwatch or a Suunto smartwatch. There are many different manufacturers that make smartwatches. And if it's not directly tied to your brand of phone, then it doesn't really matter which brand of watch you get. So people are probably going to decide, am I going to buy a Garmin or am I going to buy something else? So it makes sense to me that that would be more of a which one type product. How about a podcasting microphone? I've bought a few of these in my day recently. So if you're going to buy a podcasting microphone, you're the product manager, you got to set the price on this. Do you think most of your buyers are making a will I or a which one decision? Yeah, it looks like we're almost unanimous on the which one again. Couple will I's. Yeah, so the picture of the one I had there was a Blue Yeti. And I used to use a Blue Yeti, but now I use a different podcasting microphone. I would definitely say this is a which one, because when it's time to buy one, I say to myself, I want to go buy a podcasting microphone. I go on Amazon, I start searching for podcasting microphone, and I'm looking through all the different alternatives to decide which one I'm going to buy. And so that makes a ton of sense that that's a which one type product. Okay, this is the hardest one. This is the last one, by the way, and this is the hardest one. At least in the US, it's really hard. I'm going to give you the explanation, but I want to hear from you guys first, and then let's see what's happening. So a tattoo, will I or which one? And remember, you're the product manager putting a price on a tattoo. Got a bunch of will I's, few which ones. Nice, here they are coming in. Okay. I believe a tattoo is a which one type product. And the reason I believe it's a which one type product is many people think it's a will I product because they can't imagine getting a tattoo. They say, no, I'm not going to get a tattoo. But it's not about the decisions we make, it's about the decisions our buyers make. What happens if, let's pretend that you all of a sudden said, yeah, I'm going to go get a tattoo. I'm going to get a tattoo of mom on my arm. Now, what are you going to go do? Well, what you're going to go do is shop around for tattoo parlors or shop around for tattoo artists. You're going to figure out where you're going to go. So you're making a which one decision. The thing is, we had to make the will I decision. We had to put ourselves in the shoes of our buyers before it made sense for us to say, yes, I'm going to choose a tattoo between these different tattoo parlors. And so I think a tattoo is truly a which one decision. Now, by the way, almost every one of these, I could tell a story where it's the opposite side. So a tattoo, imagine that you just came out of the bar, you'd been drinking a little bit too much, it's 2:00 in the morning, and you walk by a tattoo parlor. At that moment, you are probably making a will I decision. Probably not a smart will I decision, but it's a will I decision, not a which one decision. So pretty fascinating. Pretty fascinating. So what is value? If we summarize what we've been through, we have to think about value in that will I and that which one. What decision is the buyer truly making just before they buy our product? When they're making that will I decision, they're really making a decision about the value in use. What's the value of solving the problem? What's the value of having air to breathe? What's the value of having a car to drive? Once they say, yes, I'm going to buy something in this product category, then they go on to say, okay, which one? And what's your value relative to your competitor at this point in time? So now you're going to say things like, which car should I buy? Or am I going to buy air, or am I just going to breathe the free stuff around me? By the way, that seems like a ridiculous example, but how many of us buy bottled water when we have free water all around us? So it's not that ridiculous of an example. Quick, impactful insight for us then. Value is what a buyer is willing to pay. It's either value in use or it's value in choice. But how does that buyer value our product just before they're making a decision? And I got to say that this is the single most powerful way I've found to think about value the way our customers value our products. We call this a Stiving value table. And a Stiving value table essentially has 4 different columns on it. I'll talk you through it as though it's for a will I type product or a will I type decision. It works equally well for which one, slightly more complicated, but it works equally well. But the 4 columns in a Stiving value table are problem, solution, result, and value. If you think of the solution column first, this is your product. It might be a feature in your product. If you took the time and resources to build a feature into your product, the reason you did that is because you're trying to do something to help your customers solve a problem. So what's the problem that we were solving for our customers? If you can articulate that problem in first-person format, if you can include pain statements, make it so that it resonates with a buyer, resonates with a user. Now we've got something that makes sense to get a buyer's attention. Why do we put that feature in? We wanted to solve a problem. So what's the result once we've solved that problem? Well, the result should be some quantifiable change in an outcome. I have no idea what that might be, but we could have some result. And let's say I'll do an example in a second. And then the value in the B2B world, almost any quantifiable result, we can turn around and turn into a dollar value for the customer using business acumen. Once we understand the way that customer thinks, the way they make profit, what their business looks like, we can help them calculate how much money they're going to make or save because they bought our solution to solve a problem and achieve a result that should turn into dollars on the bottom line. And we could help them, walk them through that entire process. Once you can go through this, then you can say to yourself, oh, I know what things are most valuable to my customers. And instead of talking about my features, what I'm going to do is I'm going to talk about the problems that we solve. I'm going to talk about the results that they could expect to achieve. Now we're talking about things that truly resonate with our buyers, things they care about. And this came about because we're trying to understand value. Let's do a quick example of this. Let's pretend that you are a salesperson. And as a salesperson, you're going to sign on to LinkedIn. You're going to buy LinkedIn sales platform. And what's a feature in LinkedIn sales? Well, one feature in LinkedIn sales is they let you, they give you recommendations on who you might reach out to as a cold call. Okay, so that's a feature on LinkedIn Sales Navigator. What problem did they just solve? Well, the problem they solved is some salespeople have a hard time knowing who to go call, how to find prospects, how to find potential prospects. And so they solved that problem by saying, hey, we're going to give you recommendations on try to reach out to these people. What's the result? Well, the result should be less time spent looking for prospects, more time spent prospecting. And so let's say that I used to spend 2 hours a week just looking for prospects, and I can eliminate that 2 hours a week. That's awesome. Now I can just spend those 2 hours prospecting. And so what's the dollar value of that? When we go back into dollar value, the dollar value is probably two different values I could think of. $1 value is what's the savings by not having to work those 2 hours doing that thing? Probably a bigger dollar value though is how much more money do I make if I spent those 2 hours closing deals? If I had, so 2 out of 40 hours in a week, so if I had an extra 5% time to actually sell, could I get 5% more revenue? Now that's a real number. Now we're talking. What we're thinking about here then is what's the problem we're solving? What's our feature or the solution? What's the result our customer should expect to achieve? And what's it worth to them? What's the dollar value in profit to a B2B type company? So these aren't super trivial to do, but they are the most powerful way I've ever seen to think about value and our products. So the impactful insight here is very few people understand their own value, and those that do had to work really hard to learn it. Pretty cool. I promised that we would actually quantify value in the end. That Stiving value table helps you understand value. You can quantify it using business acumen, but let me give you two really simple market research tools that you can use to go quantify this if you want. The first one is called Van Westendorp's price sensitivity meter. If you want to know a ton about this, you can look it up on Wikipedia. They're going to tell you a lot. Essentially, with Van Westendorp's price sensitivity meter, we're just going to go ask respondents, ask potential buyers 4 questions. Those 4 questions are, at what price would you consider the product too expensive to consider? At what price would you consider the product to be priced so low that you would feel the quality couldn't be very good? At what price is the product starting to get expensive, but you still might consider it? And at what price would you consider the product to be a bargain, a great buy for the money? You want to ask those questions in that order. Questions number 1 and 2 essentially bracket the answer that you're about to get. Question number 3 is the one that you love. That's the answer that you think is really good. And then question number 4, we want to make sure we're not pricing below the answer to question number 4. Now notice we're not giving them a price. We're just asking them the question. And this works pretty well because if you just ask the question, how much would you pay for? People don't know how to answer the question. They don't answer the question. They might be gaming the system. They're thinking, if I tell you I'd pay $100, then you're going to charge me 100. So I'm going to tell you 50. And so you'll only charge me 50. So they might be gaming the system. You want to be a little careful. So Van Westendorp's price sensitivity meter works amazingly well. I like it best for will I products. It's used for which one products sometimes, but what we don't know with the which one product is how well does that buyer know the alternatives? Would they go out and shop for alternatives once they said, yes, this is the good value for solving the problem? I really like Van Westendorp for will I products. And it's really good in those B2B company situations where we tend not to have big sample sizes we can go after. you're going to get reasonable data once you get to 15 responses. Now, I recommend you go to 50 if you can, but with just a few responses, you're going to get real answers that could start to narrow you in on what's that price area? How much do I think people are willing to pay for my product? Now I'm going to give you one more, and this is the quick and dirty method. If you go out and talk to customers, and at the very end, you've talked to them for a long time, you really want to ask, well, how much would you pay for this? But you know the answer is going to be horrible. Here's the question you can ask instead. How much do you think other people would pay for this? It turns out by asking the question this way, people are much more likely to give you a reasonable answer. They're not gaming it for themselves. They're actually thinking, well, how much would my neighbor pay for it? But in truth, what they're thinking is, how much would I pay for it? Because they think their neighbor is like them. They think they're normal. So this is a much better way to ask the question, how much do you think people would pay for it? Now, I wouldn't use this as the definitive answer, but this gives you a really nice gut feel for what it is we want to charge for our products. All right, hopefully I've given you guys a ton of value. What I want to do is just take 2 minutes and tell you what I do as a company, and then I'm going to open it up for questions for you guys. My company, Impact Pricing, we transform both companies and careers using the power of pricing. And in the world of companies, we help them with individual product issues or pricing issues. We help transform teams, help transform cultures. And in the career side, though, we offer education and coaching on value and on pricing leadership. And almost everybody gets value out of understanding what value truly means. We do that at the site called championsofvalue.com. That's our online school. And what I'd like you to do, if you don't mind, one more mentee, is I'd love to hear a single word that you would use to describe our webinar. Beautiful. Thank you so much, guys. And now I'm opening up the questions.
Thank you, Mark. Mark, we have already a bunch of questions waiting for you.
Excellent.
Great. First one is from Rohit. Rohit asks, what if WTP is $100, but there is a new product coming up, a competitor with an equally good product, which is priced at $50. Now the client's WTP has dropped to $50. How should I keep abreast of all these important things? Not that there is a competitor, but the WTP has dropped to $50. And the second part of the question is, should I drop my price given my production cost is $20?
Okay, so the answer to the last one is really easy. We don't drop our price because our production cost is $20. Now, there might be strategic reasons why you say, I don't want to price at $100. For example, maybe if I've got really large margins, I'm inviting competition to come in and I want to keep lower margins so competition isn't as likely to enter into my marketplace. But as a general rule, the production cost shouldn't matter to the prices that we're charging. There's an exception to that, but we don't need to do that. The first question, when we start out at $100 and the customer is willing to pay $100, and then over time, the willingness to pay goes down to 50, the odds are really good. The reason it went down to 50 is we had some competitive alternatives. We went from a will I situation to a which one situation. And so a competitor came in. Or maybe we were in a which one at $100 and then a new competitor came in at $50 or a dramatically lower price. In the end, we always have to watch the decisions our buyers are making. What I would be doing, if you're an established company at all and you've got decent data, decent trends, is watch your trend data. What kind of prices are we winning at? What's the market share that we're getting? And as soon as the win ratio starts to go down, then something's going on. It may be that there's a competitive alternative that we're not aware of that just came out. It may be that market conditions are changing, but that's the time when we want to start looking at what's causing this. And then we can make this better, smarter decisions on what we want to do with our price.
Thank you. Next question is from Kabir. Can you throw some light on valuing professional services like training or coaching?
Yes. So training is much easier than coaching for valuing professional services. Um, as everything, you want to think about the will I and the which one decision. If you've got such a great brand and people are going to come to you and they don't really have an alternative, then you can charge a lot of money. And this is why celebrities get to charge a lot of money to go speak, or celebrities can charge a lot of money to just show up to something. And that's because they're unique and people are really just paying for them. It's the will I, not the which one. On the other hand, if you are not differentiated, if you don't have a great brand name on your own, then people are saying, am I going to buy you or am I going to buy somebody else? And now we have to look at what are the prices other people are charging. And by the way, I always want to charge more than other people. I think I'm worth it. And I want to make sure that I'm always adding value and selling value and convincing my buyers that I'm worth more. And you should be doing the exact same thing. But in the end, that buyer is going to make a decision between you or somebody else. And that's how we want to think about how do I help them make that decision in my favor.
Next question is from Raghavan. How to price services, more focused on services.
Yeah, I think services are identical to products. When you think about services, we spend a lot of time on SaaS or subscription, and SaaS actually means software as a service. And so we treat it as a service. Think about airplane rides, sitting on an airplane, that's a service. So there's lots of things that we buy that are services. We want to be thinking about the exact same thing. Probably the biggest issue I find with services is companies want to sell their time by the hour, and that's probably not a good decision. We could do a whole webinar on why you shouldn't be charging by the hour. In the end, your incentives and your customers' incentives aren't aligned, right? Your incentive is to work hard, to work longer because get paid more. Their incentives are to have you work less so that you get paid less. And in the end, if you can quote the job or the project, now our incentives are aligned because we both want it quickly, both want high quality, and we both want it done. And so it makes so much sense for us to move away from selling by the hour in services to selling by the project.
Great. Next up is from Mr. Kalinga. How can we derive value for intangible products like data?
So value is always in the eye of the beholder. It is not up to us to decide, does our data have value? But think for a moment what kind of data you might have. And let's say that you have access to traffic data. So you know how many cars are on which road at which point in time. Who gets value from that? And one company that comes to mind, or one industry, is retail. Retail industries would love to know what's the value. I'm sorry, they would love to know what the cars are, how many cars are going by different locations, so they can figure out where they're going to put their next retail outlet. Well, the question becomes how much better do they make that decision with your data than without your data? And let's say that they make the decision, they're 10% more likely to not make a mistake. Now, what's the price of a mistake? How much extra revenue do they think they're going to get? So we could calculate the dollar value of that decision just because they have our data versus not having our data. So value is always in the mind of the buyer.
One more question from Rohit. You showed some stats that quite a few users or customers do not use all the features of the product. Let's assume that 80% users only use 20% of the features. Should I create a light product or reduce some features? Assuming analysis has been done and it was found that some of the features not being used will take some time to become useful.
I'm sure there's a nuanced answer to this question, but the answer I'm going to give you is absolutely yes. What we should be doing, what every company should be thinking about, is how do I create a good, better, best product offering? Now, if you're going to sell, let's say I'm going to sell a physical product, so we'll make it a traditional business, not a subscription. What happens is I get to buy one product. I don't get to buy it over and over and over again. I've got to use that information to help me make a decision. And by you putting good, better, best out, most people will end up buying the one in the middle. So you can start to tweak decisions people make by packaging your products in that format. Now, as soon as you go to subscription, what happens, good, better, best is still hugely valuable, but it's valuable for a different reason. In subscription, it's no longer people don't know, so therefore they buy the one in the middle. In subscription, people often buy the one on the low end, the good product. And as they learn it, as they get better, as they grow, they move up into the better product. And now they're paying us more money. This is packaging, and this is us learning how we can help our buyers grow. When I think about subscriptions and product teams, I think we now have to manage 3 different revenue buckets. We used to only manage one, and that was we have to go win customers. Now we have to win customers, we have to keep customers, we have to grow customers. And the way we package in this good, better, best is a structure that helps us grow. It's one of several ways we can use to help us grow customers. Really valuable to us.
Next one is from Alexander. You showed the method to quantify value for will I product, but what about method to quantify value for which one product, which is the most products?
Yeah, so you can use Van Westendorp still. What I would probably do if I were going to do Van Westendorp on a which one is I would make sure the buyer understood what the competitive alternatives were so that I know how they're making that decision. What I usually do with customers is something called an economic value estimation, which is where we are working through our way through how is our product different from our competitors' products. And once we understand that, then we're making estimates on how much do we think each one of those differences are worth to our individual customers as we go out to the marketplace. Now, there's a statistical technique that you can use that does this for you. It's called conjoint analysis, and very, very powerful technique, a little bit expensive, but if you've got the resources, it's a great way to figure out how much does somebody value the differences between my product and my competitors' products.
Next one is from Jennifer. Any guidance on shifting the organizational mindset away from cost-based pricing?
That's like the $1 million question. I think what I would do without being involved inside your company, what I would recommend is trying to find individual places where we might be able to win. Instead of thinking, well, let's talk about a grocery store, right? Grocery stores, it makes a ton of sense for them to do cost plus pricing because they've got 20,000, 100,000 different SKUs, and it's really hard for them to go out and do good, better, best pricing or value-based pricing on every one of those different stock keeping units. But what if they said, look, in average, we're going to have a 6% margin on our products, which is not too far off for a grocery store, but we're going to identify certain product categories. So there are some products where people really remember the prices and they shop stores based on prices. So we'll think of bread or milk or diapers. And on those products, we're going to make sure we have really aggressive prices. Maybe we'll take 1% margin or 0% margin. And then there are other things where people really don't shop for very often. They don't remember prices. We're about to have Thanksgiving here in the US, so people rarely buy cranberries, but during Thanksgiving, we always buy cranberries. What if our cranberries right now were at 20% margin or 30% margin? Nobody knows, and nobody can keep track of that. And you could think of this as a way to say, look, let me find some low-hanging fruits. What are some things where if we were to raise the prices on these things, it's not really going to impact demand very much, especially if you can find will-I products. Those are great. And do it incrementally, do a little bit at a time, And hopefully people at the upper levels of your company will start to realize, hey, when we think about pricing differently, we have the ability to capture more profit from our customers.
And I think now we have the last question from Prakash. What all parameters do we have to consider while pricing product in addition to production cost plus margin?
So I think production cost is irrelevant to pricing your product. Now, since you asked the question that way, I'll give you the exception to that in just a second. But if you remember the second slide I went through where we said a buyer is willing to pay $100, but it costs us $20, what should we charge? We should charge $100. And then what if it's 50? Or what if it costs 50? What if it costs 75? So the production costs don't really matter. What really matters is how much is my buyer willing to pay? That's the price I want to charge. Now, the one exception to that is in what's called a take it or leave it market, where you get to set one price and everybody gets to decide, am I going to buy that or not buy that? But people don't negotiate. Think of potato chips at the grocery store, right? They charge $4.99 for a bag of potato chips. You get to decide, am I going to buy those or not? But you don't pick up a bag and walk to the cash register and then start negotiating for a price. And so in those take it or leave it markets, your costs matter because you're trying to find that place where your marginal costs are going to equal your marginal revenue, if you remember economics. So in that case, it matters. But even then, you are much, much better off if you focus on customers' willingness to pay. So when I think about pricing, when I help companies with pricing, the thing I focus on constantly is how is my buyer making a decision to buy my product or a competitor's product? What are the things that they value and how much do they value those things? And somebody's cost, the only reason cost comes into play is, do I want to sell this product to that customer? In other words, is it going to be profitable or not? Is my price above my costs? That's the only reason I think about production costs.
Thank you so much, Mark, for answering all the questions. So since I think this was the last question. So thanks so much for the participation, audience. For any further questions, if you get any questions later, you can connect with Mark over LinkedIn, definitely, or any other mediums. So now over to you, Mark. We would love to know which one do you think was the best question, and we would love to give away the prize to them.
Oh, you mean I have to choose?
Yes, definitely. You can have a look at the Q&A section of the Zoom, and over there in the dismissed questions, you can find the questions just in order to, take a reference, a point of reference.
Yeah, I liked the question on professional services.
Great.
Training and coaching. By the way, they were all good questions.
Definitely. All questions were really great. But thank you so much for choosing one. And definitely we'll be giving away the free, in this case, which is a digital learning course from our end to the particular person. And it was by Kabir. So congratulations to Kabir. So Mark, thank you once again for being over here and taking your time in order to do this webinar, in order to share your insights. We have enjoyed having you with us, Mark. It has been a complete pleasure. Please accept this certificate of appreciation from the Institute. The QR code on the certificate, which you can see on the bottom right corner, it would be dedicated Hall of Fame page for you, created for you with the recording of this session. Please share it with your network. We will be sharing the webinar recording on our YouTube channel as well. And audience, thank you for joining. It was great interacting with you all. Do not forget to register for the upcoming webinar tomorrow. With that note, I would like to end tonight's session. Happy learning and stay skilled. Have a great night. Thank you so much, Mark.
Thanks, guys.